The story of a woman who married a widower with a child. And got into a story that gives you goosebumps. We follow the plots of TV series with interest, empathize with the characters, but sometimes we think that the writers clearly overdo it with the drama and come up with twists that cannot happen in life. However, the heroine of this story faced problems that belong in the most twisted soap opera. Here's how, according to her, the events unfolded. I met my future husband at the institute. At first, we just hung out between classes, went to the cafeteria. Then we became friends and eventually started dating. That's when I met his 1-year-old daughter. He told me how he was left a single father. The baby's mother, Karina, did not cope with an aggressive form of cancer. I understood very well what he went through, because the same disease took my sister and father. This brought us closer together, and also because our tastes coincided. We liked the same music, we loved pizza and superhero movies. The woman said that her boyfriend was deeply in debt, which is not surprising, because he had to pay medical bills left after the death of his wife, and also raise a child on his own. One day, he complained that he was behind on rent and had no idea how to live on. A year later, they both graduated from college. Ruby, that's the girl's name, turned 2 years old. I immediately found a job in a small animation studio for 3 days a week, and the rest of the time I was going to freelance. But my boyfriend, although his specialty was in high demand on the market, then took on odd jobs. He worked part-time in a cafe and at a construction site. According to him, this way he could spend more time with the child, the woman says. And then one day he told me of a great plan, so he could save money on kindergarten. I would look after the baby on my days off. I saw how much debt he had on his credit card, and there were no problems with Ruby, so I thought about it and agreed. The heroine of the story sympathized with him and suggested that they move in together. At that time she lived in a small apartment that her grandmother's friend rented to her, and only paid for utilities. The landlady agreed to let the man and the child in, but on the condition that he would pay a small rent. At that time, the baby was diagnosed with epilepsy and partial hearing loss. Because of this, the guy's parents began to treat her as if she was completely out of order. Although the girl was simply golden, and all problems were solved with medication and a hearing aid. I adored this baby. Even if she were my own, I doubt I would have loved her more, the woman admits. Our daughter was almost 4 years old when her father and I decided to get married. He wanted a fancy wedding, with a full honeymoon and all that. I warned him that we didn't have the money for it. I was still paying off my student loans, and his finances were nothing to write home about. But it turns out that he and his mother thought that my family would pay for everything. I didn't think so. And neither did my stepfather, who just laughed. In the end, the couple held a celebration in the backyard of the bride's parents' house. As for me, that wedding was magnificent. The husband seemed like a handsome prince, and Ruby was just an angel, she says. Time went by, the newlywed husband finally got a full-time job. He became a sales representative. It was not easy for the young family, because they were still paying off their debts. Because of his work, the husband was often on the road. I spent a lot of time with my stepdaughter. I took her to doctors, to ballet classes, to children's parties. I even sewed the same outfits for us. The little one started calling me Mommy Mila. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, but then things started getting weird, the woman writes. Her husband's trips were getting longer and longer, and he was returning home from work later and later. Something really weird started happening with the child. One day, Ruby, who had never had any problems, threw a tantrum when her dad was picking her up from kindergarten. The little girl also started to wet herself at night, and when her father was away, she asked to go to bed with her stepmother. The woman became worried. I panicked. I thought I had screwed up somewhere, missed something. She took the child to a psychologist, but he could only get one thing out of the girl. She was afraid that her stepmother would leave her. I was confused. Our marriage, of course, wasn't perfect, as many others aren't, but why did the child think I could leave them? One day, the husband went on another long business trip. The stepmother and Ruby, who was 6 years old at the time, were left alone. I remember that night very well. The baby was sick and fell asleep on my lap, the heroine says. I was scrolling through social networks when suddenly photos from the wedding of my husband's friends caught my attention. Someone tagged him in one of the pictures. In the background, clearly unaware that he was in the frame, my faithful was kissing a woman on the cheek whom I knew very well, albeit in absentia. Her photo was on our closet so that the stepdaughter would remember what her late mother looked like. Judging by the tag on the social network, it was a certain Christina, not Karina. But the same red hair, the same tattoo. I felt hot, and then cold. I took the child to the crib and started digging. Social networks revealed a shocking truth to the woman. Her husband and Christina had been dating since school. It was she who gave birth to Ruby. But the lady led a very free lifestyle, and she didn't need the child. The icing on the cake, the lady lived in a neighboring town, which the unfaithful husband always stopped by on all his business trips. I was shaking, I was sobbing, the heroine shares her experiences. She called her brother. He and his wife rushed over in the blink of an eye. I cried on his shoulder and cowardly let him sort everything out. The brother called her husband and left him a voicemail in which he warned that if he showed up at our place without warning, we would call the police. Most of all, I was afraid that my husband would come for Ruby, the woman says. However, her faithful husband simply disappeared for 2 months. During this time, the heroine finally figured everything out. Christina was not sick with anything, there were no debts for treatment. All the debts on her husband's credit card were the consequences of his wild life. The couple got back together about 6 months after the supposed widower married the unfortunate woman. In front of his wife, he pretended that Ruby's mother was dead, but he himself, as it turned out, dragged the child to meetings with Christina. It's hard to imagine what was going on in the baby's head. The girl later admitted that her biological mother was strict with her and even called the baby names because she had poor hearing. The woman filed for divorce and simultaneously began the process of official adoption. The fact that her husband had disappeared from the radar played into her hands. She collected evidence from relatives and caregivers, as well as a mountain of documents confirming that her almost ex-husband and his sweetheart Christina were bad parents. Ruby kept telling everyone that she wanted to stay with Mom, meaning, of course, her stepmother. I was ready to fight for the child, but this couple gave up their daughter without a fight. But my husband managed to clean out our savings account, take the car his parents gave us for our wedding, and take all the electronics out of the house. The only things he didn't touch were my mobile phone and laptop. I have a daughter and a dog left, who was also once his. I think I came out on top. Ruby is now 14 years old. She is amazing, very smart, and funny. She loves science, makeup, and our pets. She hasn't decided yet what she wants to be, an environmental scientist, a veterinarian, or a blogger. I met a man. His twin daughters think Ruby is the coolest girl in the world. And my boyfriend claims that I'm the coolest here. In short, we are happy. So, my marriage fell apart, my ex turned out to be a lying scoundrel, but thanks to this crazy story, I found true love, my beautiful daughter. And looking back, I realized that if I had the chance to live through this period again, I wouldn't change a thing. Netizens were delighted with this story. Mainly because it had a happy ending. Children should grow up with those who love and care for them. And it's good that there are people in the world who are ready to accept children who have had bad luck in life into their family and treat them as their own.